Hello and welcome to another edition of Coffee With. I'm your host, Christopher Evans. And today I'm pleased to welcome Dan Gilman. Dan, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me today.
So you've been involved with a lot of programs together that are about building bridges for business. What can you talk about as far as the programs that you've been involved with that you feel are personally benefiting the city the greatest?
I think, there's a couple different aspects to attracting and retaining businesses here. First of all is the straight business relationships. When you start to look at taxation and tax benefits to having a business here, you start to look at bringing collegiality to the industries. But then there's the other side of making Pittsburgh the city people want to live in. One of the greatest things I ever heard was the head of the Google office here asked about why Google Pittsburgh does so well. And he said, because there's nowhere else any Google employee would rather be. You've got the cost of living, you've got the universities, it's the greatest place to do research as a Google employee. And so for us, we've looked to say, how do we change public transportation? How do we rebuild neighborhoods? How do we invest in housing? So when you attract a young engineer from Denver who takes the job at Google, 6 months in, they're saying, there's no other city I'd rather live in. I can buy a home for $100,000 in Friendship and walk to my office in East Liberty and then walk to Mellon Park and over to Walnut Street. That's not something I can do in any other city. So a big piece, I think, of building the bridges within the business community is how do you build the neighborhoods? How do you build the third place? You have where you live, you have where you work, and you need that third place you go to every day to expand life. And then on the business side, it's been how to attract those new companies that are coming out of our universities and our hospitals. And we've done a lot of work with Carnegie Mellon and Alpha Labs and Innovation Works and companies like groups like that to say, we've got our companies here, what's our niche, and how do we keep them here? And that's got to be our real focus in the future.
I think Pittsburgh has one of the most interesting innovation ecosystems in the country, and it's great to see young people like yourself so actively involved in helping foster that. So what do you think the biggest barriers are to young people staying in the city of Pittsburgh, and what do you think we can do as a community to make progress in that area?
We need to get out there when kids come here at 18 and show them what the city has, reach out to them through the programs we have and introduce opportunities for business here. Where else would you rather start a business than somewhere where the cost of living is so low, with the universities putting out that kind of talent every year in the tens of thousands, with the opportunity to partner with someone like UPMC, with Carnegie Mellon, with Duquesne to promote your projects. And too often, I get a company and they tell me, oh, I'm leaving. I said, why? It's like, oh, well, I was looking for a contact at UPMC. I didn't know anybody, and I found someone at NYU, so I'm taking my business to New York. Kills me to hear that, because the opportunity's here, but we're not introducing them to it. When I ran for office, my #1 promise was to create a Department of Innovation and Entrepreneurship. And that's to create that one-stop shop where if you have a company and you're starting it, the first thing I want out of someone's mouth is, you've got to call the city's Department of Innovation. They can connect you with the right people, whether it's lawyers, venture capital, startup space, tax programs. Those are the things we need to do as a government to say, we want you here, we welcome you here, and here's why to stay.
I often hear from entrepreneurs that capital is a problem, and getting enough capital into the ecosystem is a challenge, and that perhaps Pittsburgh is still limited in areas that source this type of capital. Now, whether or not that's accurate, do you think it's just about awareness, or is that really true, that we need a greater infusion of money into the system?
I think it's a challenge. I think it is true. I think we need that greater infusion. But even more, we need to convince the outside capital to invest in the city. A lot of outside capital comes in and says, hey, you've got a great company, move it to Silicon Valley and I'll invest. That's not happening in other cities where they don't come into Boston and steal you away. They say, hey, you got a great company, here's some money to build in Boston. And if we build that ecosystem again here, the outside money will flow into the city to build in the city.
Where do you see the biggest opportunity for the startup entrepreneur right now?
To me, I've always said the greatest opportunity is anywhere where robotics and medicine come together. You have the best robotics program in the world in Carnegie Mellon. You've got the best hospital systems between West Penn Allegheny and UPMC. If there's any interaction between those two fields, Pittsburgh should be the global headquarters. And I think we need to focus on those kinds of niches where we see our market and really drive it home.
If you had to tell a friend why to move to Pittsburgh, what do you think the biggest, most compelling reason is?
Pittsburgh is either America's smallest big city or biggest small town. It's that absolute perfect size where you have world-class arts, world-class sports, world-class universities and hospitals. You've got places like everything from the Strip District to Polish Hill to Carrick. But at the same time, you walk down the street, you walk into your neighborhood pub, and it's, you think you're on Main Street in small town Idaho. It's, everybody, and it's so easy to connect. You can really change a city here so many young entrepreneurs with companies doing amazing work at 23 years old and getting attention for it. You know, there's nowhere else where you could build a business at a young age and get the support you can get in Pittsburgh.
What do you attribute to your success?
It's a lot of luck. I mean, I just kind of stumbled into things along the way, and I think I had an open mind. I didn't come in at 18 into college and say, I'm going to go to 4 years here and it's going to be 3 years of law school and 6 years with a big firm. You know, I didn't have that life plan, and I just kind of listened to some people's advice, took chances, and you know, next thing you know, you blink and it's a decade later and your career's launched.
So what advice do you have for the entrepreneur who's watching that and wants to capitalize on it and start his or her own business?
Just get out there and get active. That's the greatest thing you can do. Opportunities don't come to you on the couch. The greatest line I ever heard was actually at a community meeting about public safety, and a police officer who lived in the neighborhood stood up and said, you know, you're never going to know if police patrol your neighborhood because police cars don't drive between your couch and the television. And while it was true in that setting, it's true in everything else. If you want to get out there, start going to the great mixers we have in the city for innovators. Go out there and listen to some of the speeches happening in East Liberty every day between Thrill Mill and Beauty Shop. You know, email almost anyone and ask them to have a cup of coffee, and they're going to do it. That's the great thing in Pittsburgh. You know, call my office. I'll give you 25 startup innovators to go sit down with, and 24 of them are going to call you back this weekend to get together. It's so easy, but you got to show initiative. It doesn't just come to you.
Resiliency, networking, and collaboration, it sounds like, are pretty important pieces.
Absolutely, and taking advantage of what Pittsburgh has to offer.
Excellent. Well, Dan, we really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining us on Coffee With.